Hi, everyone. Due to some very tragic circumstances up in Chico with the fires, we are not having class tonight. So I'm recording a video to introduce the final assignment because you will need to have time to do it, and it is due December 2nd. There's a few other things we'll do on this video. I hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to share the screen and you will see some stuff going on. Okay, so you can see here the agenda. I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback and an introduction to the final evaluation report. First of all, the feedback. I read through your discussion of St. John. It was a really excellent conversation. I really enjoyed reading your thinking. To kind of confirm some of the stuff you thought about, yes, it would likely be more time consuming to research multiple testable perspectives on the same issue. However, it really does bring this idea that you wouldn't just select a theory and pursue it utterly without ignoring all of the other potentialities. And I think many of you remarked on that and how it might really, like, thinking about how the ability to test different ideas, different policies, different theories would enable us to really find the most effective way to address issues of equity. And I just wanted to bring up a point that Two-Way made. When conducting this kind of research, a potential issue is that cherished ideas of social justice may not play out well in practice. So it actually allows us to see what works and test various ways of thinking about things. It's very, very important. I think sometimes when we care a lot about social justice, we get an idea in our mind of how something needs to be addressed, but it may not actually really work. And so caring a lot about social justice may mean opening our mind to various approaches, some of which may work better than others, and some of which may work better in certain contexts than others. Okay, so the final evaluation report. I'm going to go to the actual assignment, which is already up for you, and then I'm going to talk about the, I'm going to go over an example. Okay, so here's the assignment. As a group, you will construct a 2-page or so, 1.15 space, so definitely not double space reports. I don't know, in universities they do this double space thing. It drives me crazy. But in the real world, a lot of times it's just 1.15. And so you're going to do a report on your construct in the data. So be sure to cover the following aspects. Number one, you need to have a construct definition. So, and this is more than just a sentence, a few sentences defining the construct and how it fits into the overall evaluation. Number two, you will need to describe your instrument. So your instrument is your questions about your construct. So you'll describe the number of questions you'll have. You'll describe the types of questions, including how many Likert, how many open-ended. For the Likert scales, you will describe the range. So you'll say, it was a Likert scale from 1 to 8, with 1 being strongly disagree and 8 being strongly agree, right? So you will actually describe those things. And the best reports often give an example question for each main area. So in your set of Likert questions, for example, you'll give maybe one example. Then you also want to give the results of your findings. And this is the bulk of your work. So it'll be a few paragraphs, probably close to a page or more, including the figures. So you would have figures of your quantitative. So maybe it's a bar graph or something like that. And an interpretation of the figures. So the interpretation and the figures can include a discussion of comparisons of means. So you all should be comparing the mean between cohort 1 and cohort 2. Cohort 1 being the one that's very well integrated, and cohort 2 is the one that's not, right? So that's our big experimental design. We want to see the difference. So you should all be comparing the mean of your construct items. You may discuss higher or lower rated items. So maybe that you have 5 Likert items and some are rated higher than others, and you may show them in a bar graph and discuss why you think that is. And then I use this word musing because we don't, we're not really doing causal research, but you might muse as to why something might be the case. And you would use hedging language, like, well, it might be possible, like that. And then you want to code your open-ended questions, and I will talk about that in the slideshow. Finally, you'll have a set of recommendations. So this is about a paragraph saying, based on what you found, what you would recommend in terms of cohort, the way the cohort should work. And then finally, just follow that up with a few sentences detailing which person contributed what so that we can all get credit for it. And you'll want to, so you'll essentially, the points are for each of these items. So, making sure you provide the construct definition, that will be a certain number of points. The description of the instrument will be a certain number of points. The bulk of the points will be the results. And then each of these things, figures, interpretation of figures, coding, all of those get certain points. So as you look through your final report, you'll want to just, look through this and make sure that each of these things are there. It's a really easy way to check your grade. And then finally, clean it up and make it look good. When we submit a report to an agency or to someone, it can't have typos, it can't have weird margins. We really want to actually make it look good. And then you can use, I'm going to go over an example, and that is uploaded as well for you. So you can use that as a source of formatting and wording. Okay, so here's the example. This is a report that I did actually some years ago. So you may also critique it. You might find things wrong with it, which is totally fine. But I think it still provides a useful way of looking at things. So you don't need to do an introduction because that will be covered. Well, either I will write it or we'll use the figure that we've been using. But you'll need something like this, data that was collected. So you'll want to define the construct, the data that was collected. Let's see. So you'll see here there's a timing on data collected. When things were collected, you'll want to have something like that. And then notice that we're focusing on outcomes. That's something that we're doing. Okay, so teacher confidence. Now, just so you know, I did not define this construct. Very bad of me. You will need to define the construct, so do not repeat my mistake. But you notice that I talk about the fact that it's a Likert scale, pre and post average confidence rating for each of the subconstructs. Here's the Likert scale. I did not list any of the questions, also very bad of me, to give them a sense of what the questions are or give the number of questions. So I guess I'm critiquing my own work here. But notice that there's a figure here. So, and then I actually made the figure look nice. I didn't use default Excel coloring. Blah. You want to actually color the figure something that will look nice on your report. And notice that the colors correspond to the colors of the whole report, all right? And I have a little figure here so you will know pre versus post. And that the figure has a description, average pre to post survey scores for each subconstruct regarding teacher confidence, all right? Now, each of these subconstructs consists of several questions. I should have described that earlier. And I averaged across those several questions. So collaboration had 3 or 4 questions and I took the average, which is something I will talk to you about doing. You may want to do that. So there's plenty to remark on here, and you can see where I interpret it. Teachers felt most confident collaborating with other educators and using hands-on and inquiry techniques in their teaching. Now, note that I'm stating the obvious, but you really need to do that. You always need to interpret your figure for people. So even though someone could look at this and be like, okay, well, I see that science pedagogies and collaboration are the highest, I'm going to say teachers felt most confident collaborating and using these inquiry techniques. There were no significant differences in their rating. So of course I was using statistics, but you don't need to do that unless you really want to. Likely the professional, and here you can see my hedging language, likely the professional development program's lack of ability to impact their confidence in these areas is due to initial high confidence. So I'm making an interpretation. Nonetheless, it is interesting that they displayed such initial confidence in the area of inquiry and hands-on science education, as research indicates a lack of inquiry-based teaching in many elementary classrooms. So I'm saying, hey, this may be a little bit problematic, all right? Now, I go on, right? So that there's more interpretation of this. In pre-surveys, teachers expressed less confidence in using environmental pedagogies and knowledge of watershed topics. However, their confidence clearly increased over the course of professional development. So you can see that here in the figure. All elements showed a significant pre to post increase, except for their confidence in drawing connections between social studies, science, and water education. So then I call out specific areas that increased quite a lot. And you can see here, I actually call out the numbers, an increase of 2.4 to 3.5, or a 22% increase. So I'm emphasizing particular things and saying on a Likert scale of 1 to 5. So you can see the amount of information that's provided here. And these are particular items within those subconstructs. You can see where I pull out particular items. Then I give, again, a kind of a hedging musing about what might be happening here. And part of this is because I, of course, know the research, but this program potentially addressed several barriers identified in the environmental education research. First, teachers must have the content knowledge necessary to teach about the environment. This is addressed through increases in confidence in watershed content. Second, teachers must understand the intersections between human behavior and the natural world. Addressed through increased confidence in environmental education areas, third point above, etc. So you can see how I'm kind of doing some musing based on the literature. You may not know this literature for your construct, and that's fine. I don't expect you to muse based on the literature. All right? Now, note this table. So now I give a table that is giving specific mean, pre-mean, and post-mean. And then here's my t-statistic. You remember about t-statistics. You can see this is specific constructs. Rate your competence in your ability to integrate the environment into the teaching, use the outdoors to teach scientific concepts, etc., etc. So you can see where there are significant differences, and I note them. You may want to actually give the numerical mean, and actually it's the standard deviation that's in parentheses. How awesome is that? For some of your numerical stuff, right? So not just a figure, right? Because this doesn't actually give the numerical mean. So I am giving them a little bit more information here. Now, if you're super adventurous, you can run a t-test between each cohort, right? Between the cohort that's getting a lot and the cohort that's not getting a lot of collaboration. So that might be interesting if you really want to go out on a limb and use a t-test in Excel. Okay, I briefly unshared. I have to share again. One moment. Okay, so, and you can see here that in this case, I'm actually giving, so here is the overall, this is the overall subconstruct. So this is that I'm averaging across, and these are the items, okay? So you may have sets of items that you want to average or that you may want to treat separately. In the case of the big figure up above, I average them. So this figure, those items are averaged, right? Environmental pedagogies, those are averaged, pre to post. But down here, I pull them apart so you can see environmental pedagogies, that there's 4 items that I average together, and I'm treating them separately to show the difference pre to post using a t-test. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint. I was going to have you, unpack this yourself and really look through it and think about it in a constructivist manner, but the best laid plans are waylaid by ginormous fires. So instead, I just went over it for you, but it's available for you to really look through and use as a template. I want to talk about a couple of other things. In Excel, you may want to rename the headings of your Excel spreadsheet because it's kind of bulky to have the entire question up there. So I did demonstrate this in your Excel spreadsheet, but here's some directions for you if you need directions. You rename the headings, you create a code book, there's already one created, highlight and copy the row of questions, And then it gives instructions here. So this PowerPoint will be available to you on our week. And you can invent short names for each item. I also talked about averaging across Likert scales when I was talking about the assignment. There's also instructions here for averaging across Likert items. You may, so you can highlight the column and click Insert. So essentially, these instructions give you like a step-by-step for doing it, but there's various ways. But essentially, in the most important thing to know about is that this this little syntax right here, equals average with a parentheses, and then you go and select the entire column of data. That's how you figure out what's going on, the average within that column of data. There's of course also videos that will give you that will walk you through this. You can also average by creating a pivot table, and one of our groups will be giving a presentation on how to create a pivot table, but unfortunately it will be a little late by the time you get that presentation. Okay. Analyzing open-ended questions is a little bit like qualitative coding, which I know that you've done a little bit of in Dr. Strom's class. For each question, you essentially list the major responses that emerge. So you don't list every single response, but you sort of start clumping them together, right? So if there's something like for example, I asked a question, what helped with the reasoning you engaged in your assignment, the scientific reasoning, all right? And one student might have said, well, the teacher made us revise the lab and that made me really think about what was going on. Another student might have said, when we had to redo the lab, I was forced to correct my answers. In both cases, they're talking about revising the lab. So you can see here, I made a category, revising the lab. Then I'm going to tally the number of people who mentioned revising the lab. And then I'm going to give a couple of quotes. And this is just, I usually just do this in a table so that I have those quotes available to draw on. Then when I go to write it up, I will say things like, 6 students discussed how talking to peers helped them with their reasoning. And then I'll give a couple of quotes. In contrast, only 4 students talked about revising the lab. Here's what they said. All right, so that's one way to do that. All right, I'm going to stop share for just a moment. Okay, sharing again. Okay, so in the example, there are some examples of what to do with open-ended questions. So you can see here, starting here, teacher comments provided excellent insight into what went well and suggestions for meeting teacher needs. Overall, teachers felt the following were the most valuable. And you can see here, teacher planning time, and then I put the number of comments. Demonstration of lessons, including material and hands-on components, 15 comments. Meeting and working with outdoor staff, 3 comments, etc. Right, so here's the general thing, here's the number of comments. I did not give actual quotes here, so it would have been actually helpful perhaps if I had given a quote. So when I talked about teacher planning time, for example, one teacher said, and then give the quote. I think that would have been a little bit better. Okay, so that's all about the assignment for now. If you have any questions, please email me. I'm also available for phone calls. I know this is particularly difficult because we're not seeing a lot of each other, and I want to make sure that you feel supported. You also, of course, need to divide up this assignment between the group. So you might split things up. You might have one person, for example, do open-ended questions, another person do the Likert question figures, maybe another person do the analysis, right? So you really want to divide it up so that you're not overburdening yourself. You should also have one of the people, serve as a final check on the paper to make sure that it all works really well, reads really well, and looks really good. All right. So really divide up the pieces and have some deadlines, all those kinds of things for group work. Okay. So just a few other things here during this video. One is that your CQA, your final CQA, I've started reading them, and it's really been enjoyable to see how your skills at analyzing and critiquing research are developing. You've also, most of you, addressed the issues I brought up in previous comments. So like you increased, or maybe you tried to synthesize, whatever I was bringing up in previous comments, you put effort in, which I really appreciate and love to see. And I also saw efforts to synthesize, not across all of you, but many of you. And I think those efforts will be very useful as you return to your literature review in the next month or two. I'm going to talk about this again when we have class in person, but just to kind of be very clear, there's no more readings for class. Aside from, of course, the Dat Now and Park reading, which we were supposed to discuss today, the day that class is canceled. I will no longer have a draft evaluation report due November 18th because there's just not enough time. So I'd like you to email a draft to me by November 20th if you want to get feedback. So this is now it's not mandatory any longer. Your group can email a draft by November 20th to get feedback if you want. And then the group evaluation report is due December 2nd. And this is a Word doc, so this will not be uploaded to Blackboard because, of course, I need to put all the pieces together into a report. Finally, I want to talk a little bit, give you a little bit of a heads up about spring. So, qualifying exam 2 preparation. In spring, you have residency, and you have the pilot study class with me, which I'll be talking a little bit about prepping for pilot study when we get together in a couple weeks. But for Qual 2 prep, it's through our advisory groups, and we have planned, we really want to support you, and there's not really a class to support you now, so we are going to support you through some workshops. There will be 4 Qual 2 preparation workshops on Saturdays, and these are the same Saturdays as your residency, so you don't need to come in specially. You'll just stay. After the residency class is over, you'll stay, and we will have our Qual 2 prep workshops. The workshops will be presented by the second-year advisory faculty. So you'll see on the 2nd of February, there's a workshop on the overview and the problem statement. That's Dr. Haas. On the 16th of February, there is a presentation on writing the lit review. That's Dr. Ariaza. The theoretical framework on the 16th of March will be presented by Dr. Gray. And then there will also be, at some point, there will be a chapter 1 overview by Dr. Haas during a residency class at some point. And then on the 13th of April will be a methods and research question presentation by myself. So these are really extremely, extremely important for you to get your Qual 2 done. We also are going to provide a little bit of a mechanism for feedback with your advisory group. So please put these on your calendar. I just want to give you a heads up as soon as we can about the dates. But again, they're the same dates as your residency, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Okay, one more thing. I have a survey about this course. It's this link, so these slides will be uploaded under week 13. So please click on this link. I'm also going to send it to you in an email. And if you will, please fill out the survey. The big thing is I need your feedback and your help to make it a better class for next year. This was the first time I taught it. In fact, it's the first time it's been taught in this whole program. It might be the first time a class like this has ever been taught, because usually it's either, quantitative methods or evaluation or something like that, like, in terms of putting something like this together. So I'd love your feedback. I think it would really help students next year. You can also critique my survey. You can get in there and be like, oh, Dr. Hayes, that question was terrible. So please feel free. In any case, I hope you have a really great Thanksgiving break, and I will see you on the 29th. Hopefully all the fires will be done by then.